What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another video here with the NFC South Division breakdown. So we're going to get right into it. Looking at how the division performed last season, the Buccaneers obviously winning the division at 10-7, being the only team to make the playoffs. Kind of a slow start last season for the Buccaneers, but ended up really catching fire at the end of the season, going 10-7 and making the playoffs. Obviously, losing in the first round is not what they wanted, but I think overall successful season for Tampa. For the Falcons, kind of the opposite scenario happened. Very strong start to the season. I think at one point they were 6-3, and then it all really just kind of collapsed on the back half. Fell to 8-9, ended up missing the playoffs, obviously. And then the Panthers and Saints both going 5-12, both obviously missing the playoffs. For the Panthers, did show some flashes at the end of the season, and for the Saints, a weird hot start. I think at one point they were 3-0, but obviously after that complete and total collapse, they were one of the worst teams in the league. Looking at the individual team analyses, starting with the Buccaneers, I do expect this to be the best team in the division again. I think this is one of the better teams in the league. I have them at rank 8, and I think that's going to be centered around a very high-powered offense. Just going down the list, Baker Mayfield, I think, is a top 10 quarterback in the league. I think he has proven that he can play at a high level with this team. He has had them competitive in his time there and really just proved to the league that he is one of the better guys. Obviously, there was the point after him leaving the Browns. He had the brief stint with the Panthers and the Rams where a lot of people had kind of written him off, and he has come back to show that, he deserves to be in this league, and he does his job at a very high level. So kudos to him for that. At running back, obviously, you have Bucky Irving, who is every football guy, every fantasy football player's favorite NFL player right now. And Bucky Irving is an incredible running back. I do think he's going to continue to grow and develop and be a real asset for this team. And they also have Rachaad White there still as their RB2. I think he's going to have a meaningful role on this team. And at the very least, provide solid depth at the running back room. And I think that's what this Buccaneers offense does really well, is they have incredible depth at their skill position spots. And I think that is very obvious with their wide receivers. I think they have 4 solid guys there, good to great to solid guys. Starting with Mike Evans, obviously has been one of the best wide receivers in the league for a while now. And I don't see that changing this season. I think he's still going to be very good. You also have Chris Godwin, who before his injury last season was playing at a exceptionally high level. He was looking like one of the best wide receivers in the league. Obviously did get injured, and coming back from that injury, he could have slowed down a bit from last season going into this year. But we know that ceiling is there. And then at your third spot, Emeka Egbuka, who you drafted in the first round. You have a first-round talent at receiver as maybe your third best option right now. I love the upside of Egbuka. I think that in this talented receiver room, I think he's not going to be asked to do too much right away. I think he's going to have time to learn and grow and develop as a receiver, and I think that that's going to be very good for him. And then even Jalen McMillan, in the time he got last year, playing in Godwin's absence, I think he showed a lot of flashes. I think he's a very solid fourth option, and just incredible depth for this Buccaneers team, specifically at running back and the receivers. It's just a lot of guys for a defense to have to handle, and I don't know if there's a defense that can, keep track of all these different weapons. I haven't mentioned yet their tight end, Cade Otton. I don't think he's like a top 5 tight end in the league, but I do think he is, a solid to good tight end. Obviously, with the injuries last year, he had to step up and play a larger role, and he did. That's just another receiving threat in this offense. And I think the offensive line as well is very good. I think that raises the ceiling of this offense even farther. And I think that this Buccaneers offense is going to cause some problems this season. I think that they just have a lot of guys and a lot of talented guys, and that's going to be a lot for any defense to contain. Looking at the Buccaneers defense, I think their front seven is about average. I am interested to see how Hassan Reddick does in Tampa. I don't have a ton of expectations, but if he does play at the high level we saw him last with on the Eagles, then, maybe that adds, a superstar pass rush to this team that could really be a boost to this defense, which I don't think is, I don't think it's terrible, but I don't think it's a strong suit. And specifically their secondary, I think, is lacking. But I do think the Buccaneers this season can be similar to what the Lions were toward the end of last season or what the Commanders were last season, just in terms of I think this is going to be a very strong offense with maybe a defense that is not getting a ton of stops. And so what that means is we're going to see a lot of high-scoring games, a lot of shootouts, and just a lot of fun football to watch for fans, which is very exciting. I think the Buccaneers are going to be a very exciting team, and I do think they will be the best team in this division again. Looking at the Falcons, this is one of the teams I am more intrigued by, or most intrigued by this season, just because there's a lot of question marks around them. Starting at quarterback with Michael Penix Jr., I have him at rank 27 right now, which in the limited action we saw from him last season, this ranking is definitely too low, but just because we haven't seen a ton, I don't want to rank him too aggressively. I want to see more, but I will say I do expect him to develop and play at a higher level than this. I think if he does play like the 27th best quarterback in the league, that is probably a disappointment. But I do fully expect him to be playing above that just going into the year. Because we haven't seen a ton, I can't rank him that highly. At the running back room, I think the Falcons have one of the best running back rooms in the league. I think there's a debate to be made that they have the best. Bijan Robinson, it would not shock me if he's the leading rusher this year. And then Tyler Algier is a very capable RB2. I think he could be an RB1 on a lot of teams. And I think just having that duo is going to be a very strong asset for the Falcons. Looking at their wide receiver room, Drake London and Darnell Mooney, I think, is a very strong wide receiver duo. Drake London, obviously, a prototypical X receiver, jump ball, go up and get a guy. Obviously, already established a good relationship with Michael Penix. There was a strong connection there at the end of last season. So I think Drake London is going to perform at a very high level this season. I think he's going to put up a ton of numbers if Penix does develop. And then Darnell Mooney, I think, is one of the more underrated receivers in the league. I think he is going to be an asset as their wide receiver too. Looking at tight end, I don't know anymore. I have Kyle Pitts ranked as the 18th tight end in the league. I think there's an argument to be made that that's even still too high. And it's been every year that, is this going to be the Kyle Pitts breakout year? I know that's been a big fantasy football thing. And even just for the Falcons, to have him play at the level they drafted him for would be an incredible boost to this offense, but it just hasn't happened. And it's kind of come to the point where it's become obvious that it's probably not going to happen. So I have him ranked at 18. There's always the world where he does finally break out and plays like a top 5 tight end in the league. But I just don't think that's very likely. He has played as an average to below average tight end, which is where I have him ranked. That's probably the production they're going to get. But there is always that world where he does, reach that superstar potential. But I'm kind of tired of falling into that trap. The offensive line, I don't think is incredible. I don't think it's terrible. I think it's about average. I don't see it as a real strength of the team, but I also would not be overly concerned about it causing them a ton of problems. Defensively, the front seven has been a major weakness for the Falcons over the past few years, and they did a lot to address it this offseason in the draft, drafting 2 edge rushers in the first round, trading next year's first round pick to get back up to draft James Pierce Jr. after already drafting Jalen Walker. I like both of those players. I do think the trade back up was a lot of draft capital to move back up. But if both of these guys can play at a high level, then obviously that'll be worth it. I have them ranked at 19 right now as a unit just because these are obviously the front seven is more than just these two guys, but the pass rush is really where they have been lacking. And they drafted these Jalen Walker and James Pierce Jr. to fix this pass rush, and we just haven't seen them play a snap in the NFL yet, so I can't rank them too high. But if they both play as first-round caliber edge rushers, then this is immediately going to be one of the better pass rushes in the league, and that will elevate the front seven, elevate the defense, and a defense that I think already has a strong secondary. AJ Terrell, one of the more underrated corners, I think, has been playing at a pretty high level. And you also have Jesse Bates, who's still strong at safety. The rest of the secondary is solid, but those two guys specifically are elevating it. And I think the defense is going to be solid with the upside of being one of the better defenses in the league if you can get production from your rookies. And yeah, I think that's really kind of the narrative with the Falcons is if players can reach their upside, this team will be a lot better than obviously the rank 20, which I have them at now. I would not be shocked if they are one of the better teams in the league. I would not be shocked if they won this division. If Michael Penix Jr. is the guy, if their first-round rookie edge rushers are studs, and maybe even if Kyle Pitts has a breakout season, I would not be shocked by really anything from the Falcons. I think their ceiling is very high, but just as of right now, there's a lot of unknowns, and so I have to have them ranked lower. Moving on to the Panthers, I think there's been a lot of optimism about the Panthers, specifically around Bryce Young. Obviously, he showed flashes at the end of last season that, he was the guy that they drafted number 1 overall. But I think that an oversight a lot of people have on the Panthers is that the roster talent aside from Bryce Young, regardless of how good he actually is not that strong. Looking at the rest of the offense, the running back room I have ranked at 18. Chuba Hubbard, obviously, I do really like Chuba Hubbard. He was excellent last season, but I don't think he is one of the top backs in the league. And I don't love the depth there. I do think Rico Dowdle is solid. I don't know if he is. It feels like you have two about average backs instead of having a good back and a solid number 2. I think both of those guys are more suited to be number 2 backs. Looking at the receiver room, I do like the upside of Tedero McMillan. You hope that you can get more out of Xavier Legette. I think there's upside in that receiver room, but I don't know how high that ceiling is for this year. I have them ranked at 22 right now. Obviously, that could go higher. But as it stands now, it's not incredible. Tight end, you have Tommy Tremble starting at tight end. That's not great. You have Jatavian Sanders, who hasn't really done anything in the league at this point. You hope maybe he can develop. But tight end, I think, is really just a hole on this team. The offensive line is not the worst, but I don't think it's, a crazy strong suit. I think you can definitely do better than what you have. I think it should be solid enough in protecting Bryce Young, but I don't think it's elevating this offense any higher than it already is, and I don't think it's that high to begin with. So that's where my real concerns with the Panthers are. It's just, even if Bryce Young is incredible, he doesn't have a lot to work with right now, which is why I have the team ranked as low as they are. And then looking at the defense as well, I don't think the front seven's that good. You haven't really had a strong edge rusher since you traded away Brian Burns. You do have Derek Brown on the inside, who's a solid interior defensive lineman, but that's about it. You drafted Nick Scorton. Hopefully he can, add some juice to that pass rush. The secondary, I think, is, average to above average. J.C. Horn, I think, is one of the better corners in the league. Outside of that, it's about an average room. I don't think the defense is going to be a real strong unit, but it's probably, I think the secondary is probably one of the bright spots on this team, aside from, Bryce Young, if he is the guy. But overall, I think the Panthers, there's optimism. I think you have found your quarterback. I think you can see more flashes from Bryce Young this season that proves that, but I don't know how high their ceiling is just with the roster talent on the team aside from him. And last, but, well, probably least, as I have them at rank 32 in the league, is the New Orleans Saints. Just not a ton of optimism for the Saints going into next season. You drafted Tyler Shuck in the second round, which I think was definitely too early. I don't hate Tyler Shuck. I think it's a weird move for the Saints because this is, a season where you're probably going to finish near the bottom of the league. You're probably going to be picking high in next year's draft. And you'd think that would be to draft a quarterback. And if you do, then it just seems like you wasted your second round pick. I think Tyler Shuck might have some upside. But it just felt like a weird move. Just aside from the fact that it was Tyler Shuck in the second round, which obviously a lot of people would have been like, that's way too early. But even the team fit, I don't understand why the Saints went with quarterback now when they're probably going to be in position to draft one next year. Looking at the rest of the team, I think Alvin Kamara is probably the best player on this team, but he is getting older. He played at a high level again last year, led the team in targets, I think. Which, I mean, that speaks to your receiver room when your running back is leading your team in targets. But obviously, Alvin Kamara is also very talented back. I think that is the strong point of this team is the running back room. I have him at rank 17. I just have age concerns, but I think he's still going to produce. Wide receiver core, I think Chris Olave can be a good wide receiver if he stays healthy, but he has really not shown an ability to stay healthy through an entire season yet, so I have concerns about that. I think that, the receiver room is not terrible. I really like Rashid Shaheed. Obviously, he's coming back from an injury. You bring in Brandon Cooks, who at this point in his career, I don't know how valuable that is, but at least it's something. If the wide receiver core stays healthy, I think Olave and Shaheed can be a solid duo, and I think Brandon Cooks is a solid 3, but I do have a ton of injury concerns there. Tight end, I don't think Juwan Johnson's anything special. Taysom Hill, obviously, technically a tight end, but he kind of plays all over the place. We'll have to see when he comes back from injury, and how that injury has affected his play, see if he is still as effective as he was, but not a ton of confidence about the tight end room. The offensive line, I don't think is terrible. I don't think it's great. I don't know if it's going to be really dragging this team down or elevating it. And then defensively, the front seven is not great. Cam Jordan is definitely past his prime at this point. You don't really have any guys there. You drafted Brian Brzee. He hasn't really been much for them. You do still have Demario Davis at linebacker. That's kind of the one strong point in this front seven. You have Chase Young. I don't think Chase Young is really anything at this point, unfortunately. And then the secondary, obviously trading away Marshawn Lattimore. You do have a solid safety duo in Justin Reed and Tyrann Mathieu. You hope Kool-Aid McKinstry can develop further. But overall, just not a strong unit defensively in the front seven or the secondary. And I think the Saints are just really lacking in talent, and I do think they will probably be down as one of the worst teams in the league. I think they will be competing for the number one pick, which, again, as I said earlier, is why I'm particularly surprised by the Tyler Shuck selection. Just feels like a year from now, they might be drafting another quarterback, and that Tyler Shuck pick will just have been a waste of a pick. Now, of course, he could develop and be solid, and, the receivers could stay healthy. Alvin Kamara could be playing at a high level, and the offense is good enough to, make this team semi-competitive. I don't think there's any world where they're really, a playoff team, but there's always upside with teams. Guys can develop, and we never know. But my expectations for the Saints going into the season are not high at all. Looking at my projections for 2025, the Buccaneers, I think, are going to win between 8 and 11 games. I will say, just to clarify, like with the Falcons, 7-10. That's not saying I think they're going 7-10. I think they will win anywhere between 7 and 10 games, just because I know the way I have that put can be confusing. That's probably something I should have done different, but I just want to clarify that. Anyway, I think the Buccaneers are going to win between 8 and 11 games. And I really think they're going to be on the higher end of that. And I do expect them to be a playoff team. I think that if the Falcons do play at a high level, there's a chance the Falcons can compete for this division, which is why the Buccaneers' playoff chance is only at 75. But I do expect them to be a good team nonetheless. The Falcons I have between 7 and 10 wins. I think they have a high floor just because of, how good that roster is. And then I think, if Penix is the guy, I don't know what his ceiling is for this year. Obviously, I mentioned earlier, I think the Falcons can have an incredibly high ceiling. As a realistic ceiling, I put 10 wins because I don't think Michael Penix Jr. is going to have like a Patrick Mahomes level second season. But I think the Falcons can be competitive. I think there's a chance they make the playoffs. I don't know how likely it is. I gave them about a 40% chance. But I do think there is a world where the Falcons can win this division. Looking at how the NFC is going to shake out, I don't know how readily available these wildcard spots are going to be. So for the NFC South especially, I think it is likely going to be win the division or miss the playoffs. As for the Panthers, I have their win total anywhere between 5 wins and 9 wins. 9 wins, I think, is a pretty high ceiling given the, lack in roster talent that I mentioned before. But I think you can find a solid run game there with Chuba Hubbard, Rico Dowdle, and if Bryce Young is, their franchise guy and Tedero McMillan and Xavier Legette develop, I think that offense can be good enough to get you to 9 wins. I think the defense is going to hold them back. I think the offensive line is not great, and I think there's still questions around that offense. I don't think they're going to be a playoff team. Gave them a 20% chance. I think they're definitely more likely to make it than the Saints, but I do still think the Panthers are going to be a below-average team this season. And then lastly, the Saints, I already said I think they're going to be the worst team in the NFL. I have their win total anywhere between 1 and 6. I don't think they're going to be making the playoffs. I gave them a 5% chance because, hey, anything can happen. But overall, I do not think they're going to be very competitive this year. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about the NFC South. So thank you for watching. If you've made it this far in the video, really appreciate that. If you have any feedback, any thoughts, disagreements, comments, things I missed, please do let me know in the comments. I'll be doing my best to respond to every comment I see, explain my reasoning if something wasn't clear, or if you have, a different take, explain your side of it. I'll hear you out, and maybe you'll change my mind. But yeah, always appreciate feedback, appreciate you watching the video, and I will see you in the next one.